they are okay with, whether that's best in your house, best in your city, best in your state, or just PR'd, or number one in the world for several years, and yeah, like certain people on the show right now. But like whatever, right? Whatever that takes to get there, people get there, and then you have to figure out what you want to do next, and that's a tough choice. And I think when you start, you don't think about this, and everyone's got a level like that, and you might have a level like that with melee, you might have something like that with money, you might have that with a friendship, a relationship, like it could be with all sorts of things. It's just melee is kind of the gateway to understand a lot of these things, and this is so how I bring it up. But after that point, I think because this isn't really something that's talked about.
Do you hear that?
Don't often navigate the space super well, so they're like, well, why am I not doing what?
Just that melee is a gateway to understand.
Well, no, he's like, you may have this with your friendships, with relationships.
Yeah, that was so fucking funny. I thought I was gonna say melee is like what we're talking about. He was talking about the moment when you like get what you've been after. He's like, this is, you gotta think about that in melee. Like, what happens when you get number one in your state or your city or like in the world? Where do you go from there? And this is applicable in your relationships and like your friendships and your life. And melee is the gateway to understand it. I think that's a little not what he intended.
Before or whatever, and so this can really be challenging and confusing, and then you start being frustrated. I mean, one of the experiences for me was, just to break it up for myself and make it personal. After Pound 5, I started playing a lot more. It took me a long time to figure out how to stop playing to protect a spot and be so worried about that, as opposed to still trying to grind and improve and try to, beat who I was yesterday or whatever, which I'd never really tried to do. I'd always been for approval of others on a certain level, and there was a certain level where I didn't have enough of that, and then when I finally got it, I was like, well, now what? And then I was satisfied, and so I had to figure that out, and I think this is something that everyone deals with to varying degrees, and so I hope that clarifies kind of what that is, and I do think everyone has a point like that, but whether you're conscious of it or not, how to evaluate that, I think, is important. So that's my take, and you guys can do with that as you will.
Do you want to go first, Rove?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that this we talked a little bit about this on one of the previous weeks. I remember maybe it was a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, it's true that. God, I thought about this a lot. It's true that I mean, I think that this is the case. I think that people do tend to get right, like as you work towards something, you kind of gravitate towards a. And you see it with competitors, but you also see it with people in other walks of life, right? And for me, people. This ties into a question that I used to get a lot, which was like, what do you think about how good can a commentator be if you're commentating melee? Like, does that mean that you can't be a good player anymore? And I think that the answer there is that no, it doesn't necessarily mean you can definitely be a good player and you can keep getting better. But I think for a lot of people, and I think this was me for many, many years, you go to tournaments and you derive a sense of satisfaction or a sense of for me, I would go to these major tournaments and I knew that at the end of the day I was really there to commentate, and it was very hard to really have the drive to beat people, even if I really wanted it consciously. I think subconsciously it was a lot more difficult when I knew that, okay, even if I make it into the top 8 somehow, well, I'm going to commentate the top 8 anyway. Right? So, yeah, I mean, I think that it is, to a certain degree, inevitable. It will happen, but I don't problem. I don't think that's a problem at all. I think
You
it's
can
totally
solve
fine.
it. There are ways past
Yeah.
that. I mean,
There are ways past it.
I've moved past it. And everyone's made their choice. Like our hired, and then he decided he wanted to do it again, and he did it again, and he did it for longer, right? So it's totally achievable for and this could be, you can see this on various scales, not just at the highest level. I didn't want to make it sound like you're there and then you're done forever. Like that's not what happens. It can happen even for a while or forever, but it depends.
I have a theory on. Go ahead, Armand.
I think a lot of it is also like, I think these like points, as you described, pound 5, for example, I had similar points where like during my career, you got like to a certain goal, and then it was like, yeah, then what now, right?
Right.
I think part of the challenge is trying to find new goals along the way, right? And some days will be easier, some days will be tougher. So I do think smaller goals, right, is very important. Trying to like push that as long as possible. But I mean, yeah, I guess theoretically, like let's say someone was like number 1 at melee or anything for like 20 years straight, no one could ever challenge you. Of course, like I'm not sure if it's like humanly possible to be as like driven if no one literally can challenge you. And even before someone like is taking this way out of context, I'm not in any capacity trying to say that was me. This is absurd, hypothetical, right? But let's say someone like in any sport was like, you literally couldn't beat them for 20 years. I'm not sure if any human would actually like have the same drive and passion at that point, right? I think the fact of like being challenged is part of it, and then I think some people might be like reaching that type of satisfaction earlier than others. I don't think everyone have like the same threshold, right? I mean, you have some like professional athletes, like Jagger, for example. Like he's almost like 50 now and still playing professional hockey, even though it's not at the same level, right? Just because he
Got Tom Brady. Love Tom Brady.
Yeah, or like
Tom Brady. You gotta respect him. You don't have to love him, but you gotta respect him.
Jeez,
Yep.
Louise,
So I mean, there are some of these cases as well, right? But hypothetically, if Brady won the Super Bowl like every single year since he started, would he have continued for as long? Maybe, maybe not. It's also like you can't really prove this one way or another unless someone actually does it for like 50 years and never lose a single time, I guess. So, but yeah, it's an interesting topic. I do think side goals or smaller goals along the way is more important as well. But I mean, as long as you're also challenged, it's like a high price to pay to stay up there, right? And it can be other things in life. Other priorities taking over. Yeah, I don't know. It's a cool topic, but I mean, I think the challenge itself, at least 99.99% of the people will go through.
If I had to say anything simple, because again, not everyone is going to be number 1 melee player or number 1 in their firm or whatever it is. If you get somewhere. I mean, I think this is a general thing to say too, but if you get somewhere and you start feeling a satisfaction, you want a simple rule, I think that rule is raise your standards, whatever those are, and you just go from there. Set something that inspired you, like it inspired you to get to where you were, and so you feel that feeling again. Because you're going to follow that feeling, and whatever form it takes, it might have to be very different. You might have to use very different thinking or whatever, but that's where you want to go from that point. And when you are someone that did what Armada did, for example, and you're on top for a really long time, you have to. I can only imagine for the bit I had to do it, but for Armada, you would have to continue to find other avenues or other ways to be inspired and other sorts of goals. Win by more or whatever it could be. It could be something different. So I just it's an important question. I think this applies to everyone, not just people who succeed at the highest level in something. Yeah, so it's a great question to come on with today. But I do think we have handled that pretty well, unless there's anything else any of you guys want to add.
I think it sums it up pretty well.
Cool. Well, Young Yoji, thank you so much for calling in. Is there any shout-outs you got for us today on your way out?
Yeah, shout outs to my girlfriend Maddie. Shout outs to my boys and girls, Young Miro, Young Shoutouts to Kiro, shoutouts to Strand Daddy, and shoutouts to Crush.
Yeah, Rush.
Keep it in your mind.
I do.
All right, take care, gamer. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, have a good one.
What a poignant question, if I may. All
Where's
right,
poignant?
we got another caller on deck. Let's bring him in. Banana Foster, what's up? Where are you calling in from?
Hi, I'm calling in from Ohio, northeastern Ohio.
That's Neo. Love me, PGH Carroll at the game. Spinda. Spin is Neo, right?
No idea.
Okay,
I'm not up to date with my local scene.
got it.
But you are up to date with this question you want to ask us, right?
Yes, yeah. So, with Smash World Tour, I'm so excited that Armada is here for this question, by the way. With Smash World Tour, we saw strong performances by 5 very different Peaches. Triff, Kalamazoo, Azusa, Laud, and Polish. So, how can we think about different styles of Peach? For instance, the speed and constant hitboxes of Mog or Blue's Clues versus the more defensive movement and reactive moves of Kalamazoo or Laud, as well as just like diverse uses of turnips. Now that we're a few years past just comparing everyone to you, Armada, and saying like, well, they do it a lot like he does.
That definitely was the thing, was that people would just talk about Peach players in terms of Armada. They were just like, okay, this guy can do 70%. He's like a 70% of an Armada. This guy's only like a 45% of an Armada. So the 70% guy's better, you know.
Wait, so was the question like how do we compare the different styles? I think the question was lost on me a little bit. I don't know if you guys got all of it. If you did, that's fine. Or mainly if Armada did. This is, I think, the Armada question. But if Banana, you could clarify a little bit, that might be good. But you are muted, so that would be tough.
I think Banana was just asking what we think of the different styles of Peach gameplay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Banana Foster. Now that you're back.
Sorry, I lost like 5 seconds. What was just said?
Oh, we were just wanting you to clarify what the actual question was. Was it how do we compare the styles of Peach or what?
So I just sort of wanted to see, I feel like we have ways of speaking about a lot of other characters that are more advanced, but Peach hasn't gotten a lot of attention for a while. So I was hoping that we could just sort of think about maybe putting together a language for how different Peaches operate, like how Polish usually throws his turnips straight down and doesn't necessarily pull them in all matchups between stocks versus Triff, who almost always seem to have a turnip in hand and use them in very different ways. So just like thinking about and defining at least a couple of the top new Peaches. I made this question before Polish had his crazy run, by the way. And just like, what are they doing? How can we be a little bit more sophisticated than just 70% Armada?
Gotcha. And
I think part of it comes down to part of this comes down to the fact that, as we talked about earlier, characters in Melee can be played very differently, right? I think the reason why some characters may not be talked about that way as much is that every person that talks about Melee have their own strengths and weaknesses, right? So a person like me that played Peach and Fox probably would know extra much about Peach and Fox. And let's say PD&D, much more about Falco, Marv, Toph about Fox. Of course, we know things about other characters, right? On top of our mains, but especially these characters, right? And I guess the biggest reason is that a lot of commentators are not Peach players in any capacity. So the easiest metaphor they could use was comparing it to me, in my case, Pikachu to Axe, Yoshi to Amsa. I don't think it's people necessarily trying to be like disrespectful or think the character can only be played one way. I think in some cases it might not just be the easiest. Like you can see that with Puff, Ices. Ices is a good example. Ices is a good example. Sometimes you even have played like commentators that are really good, but they can't always pinpoint exactly all the
What they're going for.
crucial details, right? So I will be honest, I haven't actually watched too much Melee lately. So some of these Peach players I have not seen much from. Of course, I've seen a lot from Triff historically. I played against him a lot too. So I mean, I wouldn't be able to give like an exact list on all these things. Of course, if I was watching or commentating, I would be able to pinpoint it more. But I guess the overall advice I could give to everyone that does commentary for events is trying extra hard with characters. They are not playing as or against as often because every commentator will have some characters they're weaker on naturally. Like even if you're the best commentator in the world, you will be worse commentating some character. That's just how it is, and I think that's the issue. This boils down to, if you ask me.
I thought the set that was at NA East Smash World Tour was where they had the Polish versus Laud Peach and winners. That was a really good. Did you actually watch that match, Banana Foster? Because
Yeah, that was amazing. Just seeing like the different styles of real intense speed versus Laud picking his spots a lot more. It was so interesting seeing that play out in a Ditto.
also the verticality. I thought that the thing that me and Walt were remarking on that kept coming true over and over and over was how much more, especially in the Ditto, Laud wanted to be on the ground and Polish wanted to be in the air. Like 9 times out of 10, the neutral interaction was Polish in the air, trying to mix it up with the float and the platform wave land or float landing, etc. And Laud being on the ground, pulling turnips. Obviously, Laud got like several stitch faces over the course of the set. I don't think Polish pulled any, because Polish just wasn't pulling nearly as many turnips. And a lot of it was Polish, like, basically trying to approach from the air and Laud trying to anti-air or trying to space around him on the ground. And that was, like, literally every single game that kept happening. Polish would immediately go to the platforms and go to the air. And Laud would always stay on the ground, try to get a turnabout. And, it was like really, really crystal clear, and I thought it was cool how Walt in particular did a really good job kind of establishing that narrative at the very start of the set, talking about how Laud is a very grounded Peach, and Polish is very tricky with his platform movement, his float movement, and almost all of the set, if you took any individual snapshot of any moment, if it was neutral game, Polish would be in the air and Laud would be on the ground, like every single time. And so, yeah, I think it's. I do wonder, Armada, if because people do talk about the Peach players these days as if they're more varied and they have more, like, they play differently from each other, whereas the way people used to talk about Peach was that they are all trying to emulate you. Do you feel like that was even true back then? Like, Armada, did you feel like, even back when you were active, did you feel like most Peach players were trying to play like you, or did you feel like, do you think there's any merit to that? Or do you think, like, even back then, there were some Peaches that were very good that played really different from you?
I mean, honestly, I never truly agreed with that narrative. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, the Peach players, watched my VODs trying to, find things they could improve on, just like people do with other characters as well, right? But I don't think it was like, oh, every Peach player is, like, a worse version of my Peach, right? I think some Peaches played really different from me. Not only, like, for example, like, one matchup, but, like, overall. I think that also stemmed from the fact that it was just, like, an easier metaphor to use. I mean, some Peach players, overall, I would say, have been a little bit more similar. But, I mean, for example, like, MacD way back, or maybe not way back, but his Peach was very different from mine, for example.
Yeah.
But you could still often hear these type of, like, worse Armada or 70% as you talked about. So yeah, I don't think that narrative was ever really true. I think at most it was like some Peach players had a similar style, some did not, but most of them probably looked for inspiration and ways to improve, right? But that is true for any character. Like, if you're a good Fox player, you have probably watched Leffen's Fox, even if you played nothing like Leffen. Like, I don't think... Yeah, it's like... I think, like, with Falcon, for example, I think that's a very good one. I think Non-Wizzy and STJ play super differently, but you can see, especially, like, in the past few years, that it's like they all have been taking pieces from each other, right? They still have their very different playstyles, but they are like, still seeing that, like, none is using his crouch really good in these type of scenarios. I'll pick up on that, right? You have seen none like, maybe once in a while I actually should react, like Wizzy, right? So you mean you see even these type of players, even though they have like super different playstyles, they still look for ways to improve, right? And of course, looking at like the best player of a character or some of the best players of a character, that's a good way of like getting better too, right? Because no human has all the answers to one of the characters in Melee, unless you maybe play Bowser and you realize that this isn't worth it. But I guess most of humanity can get to that conclusion pretty fast.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. Something I've said on Radio Melee before. I think that the way not even casuals, but I think a lot of people in the community talk about the potential of Melee characters or even the existing scope of Melee characters, they tend to draw comparisons to the existing top players of the character. Remember, we were talking about this in the context of Wizzy PP and how people think that Falcon can realistically reaction tech chase. Like when people talk about Falcon, I just noticed that people talk about it as if reaction tech chasing should be accounted for, whereas nobody seems to talk about Sheik this way, for example, because the top Sheik player or the top Sheik players don't reaction tech chase that much, except maybe for face roll. And I think that for Peach, yeah, I think Peach players have always, with the exception of certain people like Call of Zoo has always basically tried to only do what Armada does. But at least having
Remember the note that
I remember the notepad, and I remember talking to him. I remember every time I'd tell him some idea, I'd be like, hey, maybe have you considered doing this here? And he's like, Armada doesn't do that, so I'm not going to do that there. And I was like, okay, look, take it or leave it, dude. I'm just synced. But anyway, I think for a long time, I actually don't think the Peach players necessarily all played like you, but this is to say that I think if you were active today, I think people would still be drawing comparisons to you.
Or at the very least,
I think they would literally still be
bigger than today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm happy that people are exploring what I would actually want to call the fact that they are playing differently, and I think that deserves to be highlighted. All these players have their own strengths and weaknesses, so yeah. I mean, I think it's a good thing that it's one step closer to more deserved recognition, if you put it that way.
So a slight follow-up on that exact point.
Yeah, go ahead.
So strengths and weaknesses, to get past that point of sort of simplistic analysis of Peach players, do you see strengths and weaknesses for various styles, like forward-grounded or more aerial-based Peaches in particular matchups, like versus other floaties or versus other spacies? Just like, is there any room in this Radio Melee show to analyze a little bit of what different Peaches are good at or strong at to move past the 70% point?
Banana Foster, do you main Peach?
I used to. Now I main Puff. I'm very lame.
Interesting. I was not expecting that answer. But is this an extension of your original question in that you want there to be a description of how different Peaches can play? Or do you want to just talk about what's effective with Peach?
I think probably the first more than the second.
Because that's what I was going to ask when you also unmuted. But yeah, I'd really love to hear this from you, Armada. Maybe we can do it this way. If you want to talk about the way you wanted to play Peach and what you felt you were strong at or maybe not as strong at, and how you might compare that to Triff or any other Peach that you're aware of, so that people might have more of a groundwork, more of an understanding to evaluate Peaches. I think that's what this person was really after when they asked the question.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you, PP.
You're welcome. Got your back.
I mean, I think for me, in terms of like playstyle, I mean, this is similar to other characters too, but like it was entirely based on what character you were playing against, right? Against a character like Falco, you're probably going to stay a bit more airborne, since Laser puts you in shield, which is a position you don't want to be at, right? But even there, you can see some Peach players that have like a much more grounded approach to the matchup. Maybe, more power shields, for example. So I mean, I think it comes down to like how you value the risk versus reward in different type of scenarios. I do think Triff is probably one of the more similar, if maybe not the most similar Peach to me. And I wish I could give you a better. If I knew this question was going to come up, I was going to look at these Peach players and give you a better list.
Okay.
But I feel like I wouldn't give the question justice, pretending that I have kept up with all these Peaches.
Sure.
So, as boring as that answer is, I don't want to give a list that I wouldn't fully believe in myself.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, but if I had watched, I would happily tell all the differences. But since I haven't, I can't really give you the answer you're looking for. But hopefully I can in the future, since I know that some people want to know it now.
We're looking forward to the tweet. We're looking forward to it. I could give a partial answer, but I am also not someone who's been ranked number one with Peach for a bunch of years. So I feel like it will not have the same boom. So I'm not going to attempt it because that would be embarrassing. But Banana, I think you can just look forward to Armada's tweet. That may just be the greatest way to solve this. And I think it's still good you put it forward.
Yeah, I will watch my subscription on YouTube very carefully.
Yeah, or you doing it, wherever he puts it, I suppose.
Sounds good.
Thank you for calling in, Banana Foster. Any shout-outs for us on your way out today?
Yeah, sure. Shoutouts to I don't remember his name, the Ohio player who came in last week who mentioned the Melee locals at Kent, because I went up there and that was a lot of fun. And also shoutouts to all the long-time Melee viewers who aren't engaged in their local scenes or aren't going to tournaments and mostly are just watching from the outside in, maybe getting on Slippy or something. It's great. You should come to your locals, and if you don't, that's fine too. Just keep hanging out.
For sure. Well, take care. Have a good one, gamer.
Thanks, you too.
Love getting Peach questions for Armada. We love that.
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun watching, in particular, Polish's run.
Yeah.
This past weekend, and yeah, I hadn't watched that much Polish before. And he was really fun. He was really impressive, and he was really fun to watch. Definitely helped that every single set he played was, game 5 to the
Yeah,
last
I saw
off.
the bracket and pull sheet. It was like game 5 all over.
Game 5, and they're all last off, all the way to winners finals. But
Yeah, I think we'd all enjoy to hear what you'd have to say about, Polish and maybe also Lot. I think people would be really curious to hear about all that Armada. So, if you ever end up getting the time, I'd be interested in it too. So, no pressure. I know you didn't come on to get more content commitments, but
Yeah, I mean, if there's a lot of interest, then it sounds rewarding in a sense too, right? Because that's part of what we do, right? Content.
sure.
It's a good idea. If enough people want to see it happen, then I would be encouraged.
You know what to do. Tweet at Armada, ask him for some Peach comparison content. Let him know the demand is real. This is something you can do, community.
definitely.
Hey, let's take our next caller. We got Macho. What's up, Macho? Where you calling in from, gamer?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, what's up?
Calling in from where?
From Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for having me on. So I kind of have a general fighting game question. You'll require kind of a little bit of context.
Are you the Zato Macho?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Wow, good to talk to you, dude.
Yeah, good to talk
For
to you.
context here, Macho got 5th place this year. 5th, right?
Yes.
At Evo. In Guilty Gear Strive.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my question is. Thank you. That's kind of where my question is stemming from. I've been following Melee since 2012. Love the game, but I've always
Oh wow.
mostly competed in traditional fighting games, and with the most current one being Strive, like you mentioned. And my question is that, at the top level, how do you account for your variance in everyday gameplay, such as playing your A game versus playing your B game, and kind of follow-ups to that, say you're playing a tournament and you recognize you're not playing your A game, can you get to there if at all possible? And when you train, should you train to play your A game more often, or should you train to improve your B and your C game, and et cetera? And the reason I ask this is because personally, right now the top level competition in Strive, it's pretty evenly matched, and it can be frustrating whether in tournament or even just in practice. Sometimes it feels like just variance and how I'm feeling on any given day can heavily dictate the way a set goes. So, and I'd love to pick, we have several top players, goated players in one of the hardest fighting games of all time. So I'd love to pick your guys' brain on, what you guys think about it.
It's really appropriate that you're asking this on the day we get Armada in, because I think Armada. I remember talking with you at one point, Adam, and I think I said to you, like, man, do you just not have last night? Because it was almost the meme was like, Armada never plays bad, right? And you were saying, I do play bad. I forget exactly what you said to me, but it was something along the lines of like, I do play. I definitely have off days, but I work hard to make sure, like, you guys don't see it, kind of thing. I forget what you worded it.
Like at that DreamHack, I think.
At that DreamHack, yeah.
And I think it's something along the lines like, I play bad. I'm just better at hiding it, or like my B game is like better than a lot of other people's. Something along these lines. I don't remember exactly, but I remember the situation and the context.
Yes.
I think for me on this question, I would say that at least in the sense of Melee, I feel like you almost never have people actually playing their A game because the game is so hard. I think most of the time you have people playing like maybe a strong B game, sometimes even lower, right? For me, and I know this will sound like a bit of a yawn, and maybe it is, but to me at tournaments, I often have issues with sleeping at hotels. I still can't literally do that. So for me, a lot of my practice, I was literally trying to practice in suboptimal conditions, because that's often how it did happen in tournaments. And even for like, every attendee at tournaments, I don't think it's possible to like play your A game every time, or even remotely close to every time. At least in Melee, I think having a strong B game is 10 times more important than having the best A game. Because the thing is, the best A game, that's like a very, like maybe in 100 days, you have one day where you play 10 out of 10 or close to 10 out of 10. And maybe like 80, 90 days, you will play like, I don't know, an 8.5 out of 10. And that's technically the skill that's asked. Which is why it's very silly with like, like highest peaks and stuff like that. Because partially it's incredibly hard to measure if two people are playing at their peaks simultaneously or not. But that's not really what we are asking in tournaments. We're asking who is playing the best during this specific tournament. And if you have the best players, you're not even asking over the course of the whole tournament. You're often asking who is playing the best during this 3-hour slot. So I think having a strong B game is much more important. And I do think practice, even when you're tired, frustrated, I think in some ways it's worse, because if you only do that, it's probably harder to pick up on new stuff and learn new things. But I think it's good in order to like learn to play even when you're not feeling your best and doing the things you already do know. So I often hear people say like, don't play if you're like tired or feeling a bit bad. To me, I did not agree with that mindset, because if you're in a tournament and you get to that point, even though you probably can use some methods to help, maybe like like mental training, for example, and meditate. You can use these types of methods to maybe like get closer back to like a stronger game. But I don't think it's like an on and off switch. Like, all right, I'm playing bad. I press a button, and now I'm playing good again. You just have to accept the fact that you will often end up in scenarios where the conditions are not optimal. So I think you've got to be able to like prepare for that. And I think the best way to do that is playing in suboptimal conditions, at least sometimes.
And I will say, just to follow up on that, Armada was incredibly consistent player with a very high floor. So even for that last year he played, I mean, I tell my chat sometimes this Armada that even though it was pretty clear to me that you were having a miserable time, I didn't know why at the time. that was like, it's pretty clear that you were still just beating pretty much everyone. It just showed, the consistency, and I really want people to think about that as they listen to what you're saying here. That being said, I don't really have the same answer.
I love that.
Really?
I love that because we're human. So I think what's best for me might not be the best for you. So I would love to hear your response here.
Yeah, and I could give you a better tailored answer, Macho, if I, was working with you specifically and everything. But I can tell you that when I've talked to Kadoran a lot about this sort of topic, and the topic of B game, I think, comes up a lot. And I really impress on a lot of people, because a lot of people have the same sort of question: what do I do if I'm not playing well? And I'll tell them a lot of, like, make sure you simplify your game plan even more. Make sure that you try to get higher reward stuff that are simpler reads that don't require reaction as much, because the more that you have to try and react, the harder that's going to be, and the more you're going to tax yourself if you're trying to play an A game when you're not there, you're not able to do it. So that's what I'll encourage as a general thing. But I often get concerned that people will get kind of complacent if they hear that, and I do see that a little bit. Now, of course, not with Armada, clearly, but some people can take that and they can say, well, okay, so I'm not going to be able to play well, so I'm going to kind of accept that this is a struggle. And I really do want to encourage people to shoot for more. And I don't mean being perfect, because that's not really what I'm saying either. But I think there are so many things that we can optimize in and out of the game, especially to improve ourselves. I think there's so much strain, especially as you become, you're succeeding at a high level, Macho, so I can say this is pretty obvious, that there's going to be more pressure from expectations of people or sponsors or whatever, and this is and then of yourself, right? That is going to put more on you, and so the more you can be at peace despite this, the more that, and the better you get, the more internal things, emotions, and everything comes up. The more you can interact with that, the more you can see that all of this stuff is kind of connected. We did, and Armada did mention meditation. I think that's going to be another thing that's going to help you with this. And it's also going to be something that's going to keep your game at a more consistent level if you find a practice that's good for you. So the more you help the whole human that's not just a player, I think the better off you're going to be, the better off. It'll raise your B game, because your B game won't be as low. But I think working on your A game does raise your B game kind of by proxy, because you're just learning more and understanding more. So I encourage people to go for it, especially if they're in a position like yours, and then be prepared if there's an issue, and certainly do some training in the way Armada talked about, so your body and mind and everything understands and doesn't freak out and make the situation worse if there is an issue. But shoot for success. Visualize yourself when you are powerful and you're playing and you're really enjoying it, and live your life in a way that's going to get you there. And there are so many facets to that, and so many things. I'm not going to attempt to go over all of it. I think it'd be more complicated, but I do think it is possible. I have felt it at times myself, even in tournament, and even if you prepare incredibly well, if you prepare so well and you do all this stuff, that even if you do have an issue, you can still be in a really good spot. And I've had those spots a few times too, and so I can tell you that shooting for it and going for it, having the high standard is absolutely worth it. So it is going to be a bit of a different answer, but I think there is some overlap too that I think is very valuable.
It's funny thinking about how existing top players, like, I'm thinking a lot about Amsa, because Amsa's another person I've talked with this exact topic about. And it's funny because when I watch Amsa's gameplay, I definitely feel like he's doing, or he holds himself to that standard, I think, that you're talking about, PP. But it's funny because I know that the way he practices, is he intentionally practices very early in the morning when he wakes up. When he was a working professional, he would wake up at 6:30 or 6, and he would practice first thing as soon as he woke up, because his thought process was, I'm going to be really tired, or I might be jet lagged, so I want to train myself to reach my tech skill peak, or what have you, as quickly as possible. And I want to do it early in the morning, because that is going to emulate the tournament environment. And so it's funny because I feel like with Amsa, I feel like there was a bit of both, where I think he was, from a practicality perspective, I think he was, from a practice perspective, I think he was doing a lot of things Armada said, where he was preparing himself to have to play in conditions that might not, be the best for a lot of people, but at the same time, I do feel like when I watch his gameplay, I never feel like I feel like he's always going for the thing that that he should be doing.
He's not
And
compromising.
he's not compromising. Yeah, and he will go for very difficult execution stuff. I guess you just have to prepare, like, to meet in the middle. You just have to be prepared to. You have to work hard if you want to hold yourself to that standard. In tournament.
Yeah, I think it's cool as well because like you see like all these people, like all these like if you look at players how they improve, for example, like how they got good in the first place. It's not like you see some similarities, some overlaps, right? But a lot of players they have also like their own little things that's sticking out, right? So I mean, I wouldn't even encourage like only listen to what I said or only listen to like what PPMD or Toph said. I mean, I think like taking like all of these things into account and see what sticks and fits best for you is very, very important. Because I mean, imagine like in school, for example, how people learn. I've met so many people they learn better one way and someone else a different way, right? And some people like they learn in ways where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be trash at this if I keep doing it this way. This is just not suited for me. And that doesn't mean that their method is necessarily better or worse, but it might be worse for me. So I always try to tell that to people when they're asking me about like practice methods that some stuff I'm doing it's more suited for me, and that's not necessarily the case for you, right? So yeah, I think having different viewpoints and test them all out, that's probably the best.
Trial and error, beautiful system.
Yeah, true.
That's awesome because I've actually been implementing some of the things that you guys are talking about. I actually go out of my way to practice whenever I feel tired. I force myself to practice and play sets. Whenever my hands are cold, I go out of my way to play sets. I even blare stadium noises in my headphones because that's what it's gonna sound like when you play on stage. No, I totally agree with what you guys are saying. It's good to know that the viewpoints are similar. So thank you guys so much for your answers.
That's pretty cool.
Welcome.
I actually want to add one more thing that actually crossed my mind, if that's fine. So I mean, I think two more things that is incredibly, actually maybe three things, super important for consistency. So, I mean, at least from a Smash point of view, one of my main tools that I felt like was very important for consistency, like if I hit you and you die, even if my neutral is a little bit worse, I will still have that, threat, right? Like, even if I'm playing a bit worse, every player will be scared because if I touch you once, you die. So that alone will help so much with consistency. And that's why I personally was practicing so much against, like, computers and stuff as well, to make sure that even on my worst, I can still super, super consistently get this. And I think everyday practice was very important in that. Like, skipping days, that was, like, the deadly sin. Do not skip days. That was the way it worked for me. That might be like overworking for some other people, so it would work worse. And then like preparing for opponents as well can clearly give you the edge of winning a set. I know PPMD was very good at that as well, like analyzing opponents and knowing things in advance. I mean, I was doing the same too. So like if me and PPMD were playing, we both like knew these little things, these little tricks. That could give an edge, that could impact the whole set. I think one good example, and I'm pretty sure you did study this, or at least I think you did, PPMD, but I think one good example would be from EVO 2013 when we played, and you were shooting me with a laser from the side platform, and I was falling down with an immediate nair, and I get seared to death in the first 5-10 seconds. As soon as I got hit by that, I was like, I felt in that moment that that's probably something I do too much. He has seen it, and he literally got a full stock, and he won that set.
Yeah, the little things can really add up. They can become big things, and people I think are so you've got such a routine. Everyone is habitual in a certain way, so getting something like that, forcing people to make more and more of those adjustments, on top of already just having a rock solid game plan by itself, is really powerful.
Awesome. pretty much sums it up. Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate you coming on, Macho.
No, of course.
Best of luck in your next tournament, and if you have any shout-outs, the floor is yours.
Sure, yeah. Shout out to Chicago FGC. Hoping to make waves in Guilty Gear soon, as well as other games. Shout out to Movement, team I play for. If you want to check them out, MidwestMovementApparel.com. And shout out to you guys for having me. Been watching you guys for a long time now. Love all your work.
Appreciate that.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate that. Have a good one. I think that's really funny that he said he blares stadium noises in his headset. Especially considering I don't think there have been really offline tournaments yet. It's been mostly online, as far as I know. So that's good preparedness for offline tournaments. Yeah, you gotta. That's man. I can only imagine you're like put a loop of like a crowd chatting like Mango. You practice the crowd chatting for Mango or something. Okay, I'm gonna fuck him up. Really, that's the method acting. All right, well, I think we have at least one more caller today, and it is Chape. What is up, dude, and where are you calling in from?
Oh, I'm calling from Santiago, Chile.
Santiago, Chile. What's up? What's your tournament for us today? I've seen a lot of your gameplay lately, Chape.
Yeah,
but
I saw you watching that tournament. Yeah,
it was awesome.
Thank you. So my question is, it's more like pointed to Armada, but I think PP kind of relate to this too. So my question is like, before you start traveling in tournaments like outside of region or Europe in case of Armada, and you were dominating the local scene, and you didn't have like access to top player practice, how do you defy the odds against that? Like, what methods did you do to keep up with the rest of the people that are actually like, in America competing with like great players and top talent? And most importantly, which is what I'm struggling with right now, how do you keep yourself motivated through all of that? So,
for context here, Chape, you are in Smash World, so you qualified, right? Yeah, South America. So
yeah.
Okay. Our guest today. Yeah. All the top players coming in to pick Armada's brain.
Of course.
Alright, well, for me, I think, very early on in Smash, I was super motivated. I was one of these kids that went to my first tournament, thought I was, the coolest, the best kid on my block, that type of thing. Got my reality, or what I thought was my reality, crushed in my first tournament. And I was very motivated from that point to actually get good and improve in the game. So from a very early point in time, I was applying a little bit that we went over on the question earlier of daily practice that I still think is very important. For the most part, I've tried to apply that to Mario 64 as well in order to stay consistent. And always trying to work harder. That's part of my mindset. Almost brutally go in with the hours. I think, especially when you're from less good regions, I think it's more good. I also try to apply more of the more analytical side, because I didn't have access to all these amazing players, right? I could get really good cheek practice, for example, but a lot of other characters, it was decent players and sometimes even not that good players. So I had to look at these players from the US, how are they playing? How are they playing as other Peach players, even if they might not be as good as me? How is PPMD playing against top Peach players? How is Mewtwo King playing against them? So I think stuff like that also helped me a lot as well. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is a deep question that could go way further, but I guess my mindset was playing a lot and playing daily. And in terms of motivation, it was pretty much always just looking at the next tournament and trying to win it, pretty much. And then as I went on to be more successful, it was trying to set records was a way for me to stay motivated. Oh, no one has three-peated a super major. All right, cool, let's do that. Oh, no one has four-peated. I will try to do that. So I was trying to set up goals that was oh, no one has done this before, so I'll try to be the first one to do it. So I think in terms of motivation, that was something I tried to do to keep
the spark or fire alive for longer, but eventually that didn't work out. But it did for a long time.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, at least for me, like, for instance, I haven't lost like a set since July or something like that, and I've started like trying to put like stuff like challenges with myself, and I feel like that's been a bit like more motivating sort of sense, but I don't feel like I'm like doing productive stuff. For instance, like I'm grinding punish game every day, but like I'm not gonna get like good like neutral or good situations set up with like good players that play mix-ups. Like I can play like Morse code like once every like 2 weeks, for example, and I would just like laugh myself from Samus, and I just get like destroyed for it because like I don't get Samus practice here, and I don't get like much experience out of it, you know.
Yeah,
And
I feel what you mean. I think one important thing here, and I mean, maybe it's a little bit harder to apply before a certain point, but one thing I tried to do was that even if I played against players that was like way worse than my skill level, I always tried to treat them as they were top players. I was never trying to get into the mindset of like, oh, I can do whatever I want and I would win anyway. Like, if I was losing any type of scenarios, it was like, what could I have done better? It doesn't matter if it's like someone that like I three-star consistently. I was trying to treat this player as, you know, like my biggest enemy pretty much. Because I know some players I've heard about, they are like, oh, I'm getting into this bad habit because people are not punishing me enough. So even sometimes if I did win neutral exchanges, it was like, would this actually have worked against a good player? So I think like, in a way, I was trying to play almost extra consciously against worse people to make sure that the things I'm doing actually make sense and it's actually good, and hopefully also like still have the answers for like, even if what it did is a good option, it still is almost never like, oh, it can't be punished or beaten by anything, right? So I think keeping that in mind, like, even if this is a good option, what could my opponent have done, and how would the situation have played out from that point, if that's what they went for? I mean, that's pretty deep, but yeah, that's pretty, like, that was still like an important aspect for me.